All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the B3 podcast. I'm your host, Brett. I got multiple injuries. Matt with me, as always. We got our show partners, Elite Nutrition. Check them out at EliteNutritionOmaha.com. Use code B3 at checkout for 10% off. Go to the store in Omaha or Lincoln. Yell B3.
Get a free shaker.
We also have Rosewood Block. They make the best cutting boards and barbecue, fully customizable. Check them out at rosewoodblock.com. Use code B3 at checkout for 10% off there as well. We also have Omaha Barbell, the real Midwest Mecca of Strength. Come check us out, where we usually always sometimes record from. There's no discount code.
No free shaker.
No free shaker there either.
No free shit.
We got a little different background today. We are out at, I guess what I would consider probably the real Mecca. We're at EliteFTS in beautiful London, Ohio. After the freezing rain, it really turned out to be a great day. So we're out here. We have the man that's behind all the action, Dave Tate. Dave, we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Give us a little rundown. You started Elite in
27 years ago, so...
Holy shit.
Yeah. Let's say 88, 91. So I originally started it because I was working as a personal trainer and was also doing seminars for Louie Simmons kind of at the time.
Sure.
So what that was doing is I had Elite Fitness Systems, which it kind of was at the time, and then training clients as well. But as those two roles started to emerge, in between clients, I was working on EliteFTS stuff, which really wasn't EliteFTS at the time. So I proposed to be an independent contractor for the place I was working for at the time, because I felt kind of shitty that, I'm doing other work
on their time.
In between clients, I was just kind of on their time, because I was managing the personal training program as well as a personal trainer at the same time. So that would be when it officially started, because I had to have somewhere for them to pay, into. And then it was over the next few years to where we started. There was the seminars originally, but then I would place ads in PL USA for a couple supplement products, and that was really about it. It was just that and the seminars at the time. And then after a couple years into that, Louie got sick of his mail order business, which at the time wasn't a whole lot of products. It was like weight releasers, a real shitty belt squat belt, which you might remember we had both.
They'd almost banned as soon as you used them.
Yeah, and like a man array, and I think the safety squat bar. There's like a handful of items. Some of them he would have to drop off at the post office. He basically was just sick of that. He just wanted to sell the videos and so forth. So he gave us his inventory on consignment, which wasn't a lot, but it still wasn't what I could actually pay for. So between those items and sleds were the little ad that was in Powerlifting USA. And along that same time frame, through one of the seminars, that earlier seminars I was doing, there was an attendant that asked if I had a website. And I mean, we're going way back, right? So my answer was yes, but it was what you would call a banner ad website.
Sure.
It was just a website that had seminar dates and the products and call or whatever it was. And he had a friend that was working on a forum that wasn't really a forum, which appealed to me because the objective of what he was working on was what became the Q&A, which was you ask a question, then I answer it, stop.
This is a deep squatter?
Well, Deep Squatter was where I was originally. My first computer was probably around that same time too. And my brother was in IT, so he fabricated something. So the first things I'm looking up are powerlifting and Alaskan Malamutes, right? So
those go hand in hand. I get it.
Yeah. And I'm printing the shit out of everything because you don't think this is going to last forever, and I'll never find the web page again.
Yeah.
And so with the Westside Barbell and the powerlifting is when I found Deep Squatter, and Jason Burnell was doing he was reposting some of Louie's articles with permission, but then answering some questions about Westside. And I was reading through those, and some of them, he did a decent job, but some of it wasn't what we were really doing.
Yeah.
Because some of the articles weren't what we were really doing either. And so I sent him an email suggesting that I answer these questions. So I was answering questions through Deep Squatter first, But that was a little bit of a tedious process because I can't spell for shit and my grammar sucks. So I would get the questions, then I would answer, and then he would have to, fix it. But then also put it in HTML because back then you didn't have WordPress and stuff like that. So it was all done through Microsoft front page.
Oh, shit.
So it was a tedious process. And the questions would take a month, to be able to post because he did this on a monthly basis, where this forum concept appealed to me because it would also be in real time, right? So it's when you grew up during the time period that we were kind of coming up through, the forums were a shit show. But I can look back now and say it also made us extremely callous to be able to deal with any criticism that comes online now, because back then the trolls were really talented. Now it's not so much. It's just shitty type of trolls.
Oh, yeah.
And so that is what the site originally started, was just the Q&A. So from the Q&A, answering questions, people would ask about the Russian manuals and all these different things. And that spawned developing the cart to be able to sell a handful of those items. Some of them we already had because it was through the little mail order thing. And through that, we're not talking a lot. We're talking going to the post office maybe once every 3 or 4 days with 2 items. It wasn't that big of a deal. Where with a shopping cart being attached to the Q&A, then we were able to start adding more product. So it was bootstrapped all the way through. So hopefully whatever you would make on the products you would sell, you would reinvest in more of those products that they're selling, but then new products as well, where 90% of them don't sell, so it's kind of striking that balance with that, where we were able to, pay Louie back, I don't know time period, but in a relative time period, 6 months or whatever it was, and then kind of bootstrap from there on up through. I never knew I was really getting into e-commerce when I was getting into e-commerce.
Well, and this is like pre-Shopify and all these things that have made it way more streamlined. I assume the cart was like not user-friendly.
No, it was hand-built. The programmer's still with me now. I think what his original intent was from the very beginning was to be able to develop a cart and then to license the cart out to other people, kind of like what Shopify would do.
Yeah.
But it never really panned out, to be able to do that. But in some regards, it still, when I look back, worked better than the cart that we have now. So it was more tedious, as far as a lot of the functionality of it compared to what we have now. But a lot of the aspects that we were able to tweak and kind of build through it, such as speed and stuff like that, were integrated, to be able to do that. So that's how it started. But the intent from the start was all education based, so media based, where over the time period, just from a messaging standpoint and so forth, it kind of deviated from that to where it's perceived as all e-commerce, but not media. But it's been media since day one, with the Q&A, with the articles and all that. But when you're posting content online, it's not free to host, and bandwidth isn't free. Site, all that stuff isn't free. So you got to be able to pay for that somehow. And I can go way back and remember in the earlier days, I did some audio interviews with Buddy Morris and some other strength coaches.
I remember
like
some
that.
of those.
And the hosting on that was unbelievable, where we had to pull it down within a day because there's no way we could pay to be able to host and have that up because of what the hosting fees were, and there weren't enough product to be able to do that. So it's been, throughout all this time period, it's been a balance of trying to strike, how do you pay for the content that's going out? And content has changed, obviously, from what it used to be 27 years ago to what it is now. You went from articles, this was even before blogs were a thing, so you went from articles and Q&As and stuff like that into now it's pretty much all video based, as things have changed over time.
Which is massive bandwidth.
Yeah, but now it's on YouTube, right? So the social media channels were another interesting thing to kind of navigate, because at first, when we had pre-Instagram, so we would have the training logs, and the athletes would post their videos on the training logs. And if we were to host those videos, it would have been astronomical, right? But YouTube, you can host it on YouTube, but put the embedded code in the video. So then that becomes that training log, So I saw YouTube only as a way to host the videos that we would put in articles and so forth, and not as its own medium or channel. So I was a little late to that train, and my thought process on that, and I still don't think I was necessarily that wrong, is why would I want to take people who are coming to my website and send them off to another website where the whole goal is to get them on the website so they can purchase the product to be able to produce the content, not bring them to a website to send them someplace else, or just have them all over there. And that's what a lot of companies deal with now, is they have strong social media presence, but they have shitty conversion, because the conversion from actual sales from any social media is very low. It's shockingly low when you track that back. For example, just in January, I think the converted sales from links coming back from YouTube for us was $450.
Oh, wow.
Right. So so you look at that and then look at the cost it takes to produce that. And that would be direct click backs. So that's not counting direct links or referral links and things like that. So it's kind of a brief summary to kind of go through 27 years really quick.
Yeah. Obviously, you kind of got your start at Westside. I mean, you were doing some other stuff, but you met Louie at a meet.
Yeah.
And then you kind of...
You went to
Westside and didn't really necessarily believe him.
Yes, I started competing in '82. So when troubled youth, right? So my father...
Weird.
Yeah, my father, the chief of narcotics in Findlay, Ohio at the time, had a powerlifting gym. So he knew my dad, so they made some kind of agreement to where I could go train there. So I didn't know shit about powerlifting at all. I was wrestling, playing football, and getting in trouble and being bullied and all this other kind of shit. And from there, I had good mentors at the time, because 700-pound squatters, this would have been back single ply. So a couple 700-pound squatters, 600-pound squatters. So when I originally started, and there was some training before that, just like YMCA, garage, plastic weight shit, but I don't count any of that. So I was formally introduced to linear periodization from the jump. So as soon as I got in there, I think I competed 3 or 4 months later, and then fell in love with powerlifting. So from that was through high school. Then from high school, I kind of chose my college based upon where there were people that trained and was powerlifting. And then my whole time through college studying ended up with a degree in exercise science and nutrition, but the degree was always secondary to the training. Everything was secondary to the training. So it was all powerlifting, which was all linear based. And through even through that time period, I stumbled across block periodization, the Soviet sport reviews, and all those other things. So I had a pretty good understanding of linear periodization, a moderate understanding of block periodization. And then Louie, I knew him because from those first meets as a teenager, he would give me tips and shit like that in the warm-up room of different meets I would go to. So I just knew him as like one of those guys. I didn't know who he was, you know, and he probably wasn't even that well known, at that time. I'm sure he probably more so than what I remember it, but I didn't really know because I read Powerlifting USA, but probably didn't. I don't think he was even publishing anything at that time. And I do remember through college, every now and again, people that were part of my training crew would bring in one of his articles. And I remember one on the dynamic bench press. And it was, at the time the percentages were higher, but say 70, 80% for 8 sets of 3. And telling these people, this is bullshit. This is never going to fucking work. This is horseshit.
Fucking crazy guy.
Yeah, this is stupid, man.
You're like, I've seen this crazy old guy at meets before.
Yeah, I didn't even connect that. It's just like this doesn't make any fucking sense. It has to linear progress.
So in your linear, are you doing the one where you have your end goal of where you want to go, and then like your standard,
and you chip it back. And it evolved over time because through this time period, I had a lot of initial success, really good success, especially as a teenager, really good success. And then it started to run against the wall, probably about my junior year of college, to where I was stuck between like probably a 1,900 pound total and a 1,950 total. And it seemed like, in the off season, I do like bodybuilding shit, then you go back in again. Then every time I'd go back in again, it was just fucking more injuries and more damage over and over and over, and it was fucking frustrating as all hell. And I'm talking to all these different professors to try to figure out how to build these blocks to be able to actually peak, because I knew I was stronger because I'm tripling more than I'm doing in the meet. And it just wasn't coming together. And every time I would peak, it'd be another fucking disaster. And to the point where I said, fuck it, I'm just going to bodybuild again, in which I hated the diet of all that, but the training, I kind of liked that. And during one of those stints, I think it was maybe 18 months, I put on a lot of muscle. I mean, the anabolics contributed as well, but put on a lot of muscle.
Spicy BCAs.
Yeah. And I remember doing the Toledo Hall of Fame meet, and I had gone from a moderate 242 to a moderate 275, say 260, 265, something like that, way bigger. And that meet was a shit show. And I got all this muscle, right? All my numbers in the gym, just like bodybuilding, 405 behind the neck press for 5, just crazy shit from bodybuilding movements. When it came to all those other lifts, it didn't transfer over. And Louie was at that meet, and at that meet, he's like, Jesus Christ, what happened to you? You're way bigger.
Yeah.
And as that meet unfolded, it's like, I don't know what the fuck happened. Just makes it, I'm fucking so confused.
So did your numbers go up at all, or did they move back? Or
I totaled like fucking 1620. I mean, it was a disaster.
So all show, no go.
It was terrible. And that's when the conversation became a little more serious with him, to where I would start traveling up on the weekends and bench with him on Sunday, and started to implement some of the things that he was talking about, dynamic method on the box squats and the bench, and started to see progress. And that started to move towards what am I going to do when I graduate? And I was considering either going to Cleveland to Black's Health World, or going to Columbus for Westside Barbell, because I didn't want to stay in Toledo where I was at currently, for one thing. Finding powerlifting crews, it wasn't as hard as it is now, but it still was. They didn't last very long. Mm-hmm. You'd have maybe one person that was pretty stable, but then everybody else would kind of rotate through. And what I was looking for was something like I had in high school, which was pretty stable all the time, the same people. And so I was pretty convinced it was going to be Westside, and my wife is originally from Columbus, which kind of pushed it that way as well. And one thing that Louie did and was very adamant about is, even though I had an elite total in several weight classes, and he had top lists, like a 500 bench list, I don't know if there's maybe a 600 bench list at the time, and all these other, I couldn't get on any of those lists unless I actually did it when I was at Westside. And you couldn't bench. We benched outside of Westside. It was at Tim Van Horn's garage. It wasn't a garage. It was a barn kind of outside there. But you couldn't, as a visitor I could, but as a member, I couldn't bench out there unless I had a 500 bench. And I had fucking many 500 benches and 540 benches, but that didn't mean shit because I didn't do it while I was at Westside. So I jumped in a bench meet right like a month before I was going to graduate, did the 500 bench, but then tore my pec on the second attempt, which is like 520, which was another fucking crazy ass thing.
A single ply?
Yeah, and I tore it at the top of the lift, which is weird too.
Super.
So right at lockout. And so that disrupted things a little bit because I still moved, but I had to have surgery after I moved. And then so when I first got there, I was in a sling, and that Louie had a commercial gym on Demers Road. And during this time period, he got rid of that. Then he moved the gym to this, I call it the Boxer in the Basement gym on Sullivan Avenue. It was a shithole. It was a total fucking, I call it Boxer in the Basement because there was a hole in the floor. And one day I got in there first, so I opened it up, and there was fucking somebody moving around downstairs, and it was freaking me the fuck out. And then Louie told me later, yeah, there's a boxer that lives down there. And we were only in that location, I don't even think a year, and then he moved to the Demers back, the location that a lot of people that are familiar with old school Westside, black painted windows and shit. That's where we went there. So I was one of a handful of people that was there when he moved in and when he moved out. So it was like a 14-year period from that point. But once the pec was healed, and because during this weird time frame, Matt Dimmel took the equipment, the bodybuilding shit, and opened his own gym called M&M Gym. And then Louie had the boxer in the basement gym. I'm in a sling, which was basically casted, so I couldn't do shit, but I could use the machines. So I spent most of the time training at Matt's and then would be at the boxer in the basement gym just for moral support and spot and stuff like that until we cut the cast off, which was not that long. It wasn't as I was not immobilized as long as I was supposed to be immobilized.
Weird.
Right. So yeah, I had some influences that were correct in their judgment on getting that off, but I wouldn't say that I was really engulfed in the training until we got to that Demers location. Now that's where, because I have a job now, I'm not working temp services, which I was doing for a while, as a personal trainer. So the problem that I had with the Demers location is the only available time I had was in the middle of the day, because you have clients in the morning, you have clients at night. Mm-hmm. So I was training with a small group of people at Westside around 2 o'clock. Jerry Obradovich, Tom Waddle, Mike Stuchinger, and maybe a couple other people, but they were kind of the stable guys. So we had a lot more freedom because Louie really wasn't in there. So I would do the stuff, but then didn't think I was getting the success that I should have, and then would just start doing my own shit again. And then this kind of led to a year later or whatever, a year and a half, 2 years later, of really not making any progress, and this whole time thinking Louie's full of shit. And that's where I had conversations with him where, I think you're full of shit. This is bullshit. It's not helping. But part of it was my own fault because I wasn't really doing it, either. So it probably may have never been true. I kind of thought that either because while I was in college, there's also a time period where the professors were telling me that I'm done, that you hit like a genetic limit and this is the best you're going to get. And after a while of hearing that from multiple people, you start to believe that. Louie kind of lit the fire to where, well, maybe there is more. But then when I get there and I start running into the same roadblocks again, those same thoughts start creeping in my head. So instead of actually conceptualizing those the way that I should, like more accountability on me and instead of other people, I started to blame it on him. And that came to this agreement to where it was basically I told him, fuck you. I'm going to come, I'm going to reschedule everything that I do. So I'll be in there in the morning. So when this doesn't go right, it's fucking 100% on you. It's not me. My total went up 250 pounds.
So how did Louie respond when you approach him like that? And you're like, this is going to be your fault when it fails.
He didn't give a fuck. No, I mean, that's kind of the responses that he liked. Yeah. And I like to give him a lot of shit. I was one of the few that kind of did that, but I think he kind of liked it,
yeah.
After a while. But to me, I would give him just as much shit as he would everybody else. But also during that same time frame, I think it was around when Kenny Patterson said something to Louie that pissed him off, where Louie was basically done. And then I think Kenny said, oh, man, you'll never have 800 pounds on your back again. And then that lit something under him. And then this old fucker starts training and hard, and got strong. And that was a mind fuck, too, because, now that I'm over 50, it's even more impressive because he's over 50. I'm like, how in the fuck? Then he starts doing the same numbers that I'm doing. And I'm like, fuck. So this became more of a catalyst. Like, how can I let this old beat up fucking guy beat me? And he had no qualms about letting when you just got your ass kicked, by him. So that became, so in Westside it was a crew, but then within the crew you would have the same people that you'd squat with.
Little rivalries.
So, not really rivalries, but if there's, the way it operated is if we're squatting, then there's 3 people that are squatting at one time. Right, so there's the guy squatting, there's the guy that's ready, then there's the other guy. That way we're kind of getting under the bar. Sometimes just 2 people. A lot of times it was really just 2. But that way you're getting underneath the bar in less than 60 to 90 seconds. That was kind of part of this dynamic work. Louie was my guy for most of the time because our squats were around the same. And then after you were done, you would run them on a lift and change the boards or the box height for whatever that next crew was, and then just kind of rotate through, then go on to the accessories. So we're in and that also kept it so we're in and out in pretty much under an hour. So I'd leave my last client at 8:30 or 7:30 to be 8 to be there at 8:30 because you couldn't be late. And then I would be back before 11 to be able to train my other client. So it was pretty quick, the training sessions that were in there. So it's, long story short, that's when I started, after I saw that big bump, is like, what the fuck where's this coming from? Like, show me these stupid Russian manuals you keep talking about, because I just thought he was making it up. Because I couldn't find them. Like, I swear to God, I thought he was just bullshitting everybody. Right? I really did. Because I didn't know where the fuck you get them. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So then he showed them to me. Then I found out where you can buy them. Then start reading through it. And they're hard to read.
Oh, yeah, I tried.
Yeah, I could peel through enough of it to be able to kind of see where he was extracting a lot of this stuff from and how it was put together. And it started to make more sense to where, what people would consider now conjugate periodization started to make sense at that time. It took longer to realize conjugate periodization is still kind of block periodization. Just it's all periodization is linear, and it's kind of all the same.
They're all building towards something.
Yeah.
Now, when you trained with him, you guys trained together for a long time, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Was he, and I've heard different people, like Louie is like a coach and Louie is a training partner, are two very different people as far as his niceness.
Yeah.
And was he more like a brother, or did you look at like a lot of people who are in front of this? I've seen Westside versus the World, obviously.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talked about Louie was almost like a father figure to him, to some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Or was he like just a friend, or was he more like a brother to you, or was he just the dude I trained with?
To be as respectful as I can be, all he cared about were the numbers. So how can I say this? After I left Westside, and AJ Roberts would be one, there's several people that were considering, that I knew that were considering moving to Westside. But then before they go, I would sit down with them to tell them exactly what they're walking into, right? And the way that I would explain it would be, if you played for Bill Belichick, in the NFL, right? Yes, he's going to care about you, all this other stuff, while you're a player for that team. But as soon as you leave that team, he's got other people he needs to worry about. It's not that he doesn't care, right? But when you're gone, there's somebody else that's going to take your time, your space. And that's just coaching.
Yeah.
Right? So and that can become convoluted and complicated if people are trying to use that person to replace somebody else, say like a father or whatever it is, because then when they leave, they're going to feel jaded. Like, well, I thought we were friends. I thought we were this, and in some aspects, maybe, but more than likely, no. I hate to make this sound callous, because I love the guy and he did more for me than anybody else in my life, but you're a pawn, that he's playing to be able to get the best numbers that he can on the board. And that's what you want to be, if you're in that situation, right? Because you want the best and him to be able to bring that best out from you, to get those things mixed up. It's easy to get mixed up, because I was closer to him than a lot of the other people, because we were traveling, doing seminars and stuff like that, me assisting him. And so there was an outside relationship as well. But with that, I always kind of perceived the boundaries of all that. And I also had all my clients, I had all this other stuff going on. So it wasn't like, while it was the number one priority in my life by a lot, there was still a lot of other shit, to where it wasn't like I could go over there and hang out and, have breakfast and then have lunch and go over and watch fights and do all this other shit like some of the other people may do, which could probably cloud that in a way. Mm-hmm. And by no means am I saying he didn't give a fuck about people, because he cared about people probably more so than anybody that I know. And I don't want to say it was transactional, but it kind of was, right? And if you think about this over a long sphere, if there's only 20 people in there at one given period of time, but there was also 150 that came before, how in the fuck is he going to have the mental bandwidth, to give a shit about every 150's personal life and everything else they have going on, plus the attention that he needs for the 20 people that are in there? And you're talking about a guy that I didn't need a training log for anything. He knew what my max effort numbers were on every fucking lift I ever did.
Wow.
It's just, what's my max on this? There it is. Accessories, whatever it was, he knew all that.
Yeah, that guy's memory and his ability to rattle off stats is. I was fortunate enough. I got to go to Westside before Louie passed away, obviously, and got a train out there. And I've told people, talking to him in person, I did the old call Westside and ask questions before, back in the day out of Powerlifting USA. But when you have his attention, because I watch his seminars and his ADHD or whatever, he's all over the fucking place. Shiny object walks by, game over, But talking to him in person and him just, it was crazy. It's just the craziest shit to sit there and talk to that guy.
There was a seminar that I assisted him with in Ball State, and it was in their weight room. And Louie's being Louie, right? Kind of jumping all over the place like he would always do. And there were people asleep, right in front of him, laying on the gym mats, fucking sleeping, and he just not paying attention. He's just rambling. And I have this awareness, Louie, fuck man, go kick this person, do something. And I finally, because I was the demo guy, show how to, bench, good morning, whatever it's going to be. I said, just give me fucking 10 minutes, at the end so I can summarize what you just said. And that would be if you go way back to the articles of the Westside template, that would be because I was so frustrated, watching this kind of bouncing around type of stuff that I just bum, there's this, then you do fucking this, then this, and this, and this, and this. Then I looked at it, I'm like, fuck, is it really that easy? And I'm like, it is. And while we were driving home, I'm asking him about this. I'm like, this is not complicated. And it's that's what I've been fucking trying to tell people for all this time. And it's holy fuck, this is actually simple. It's way easier, and people are making it out. I've been telling these motherfuckers, and they're all too stupid, and all this other stuff. And so that kind of, at that point, he was on the verge of kind of losing his mind, with doing the seminars because people weren't real receptive. And some of it is, the messaging was kind of all over the fucking
he's
place.
hard to follow.
So it's hard to follow. So I was able to kind of simplify that a little. It's a very basic level. I mean, he would like to play around with the details, tell people what we were doing at that time. And what we were doing at that time is not necessarily what they needed to do. Mm-hmm. They just needed to do the basic shit that we did, or that I did when I first got in there, before bands, chains, all that other kind of shit. Where there was the whole evolution from the time I was in there to where our max effort bench work was a floor press, a pin press. We didn't even have boards. Floor press, different floor presses, pin press, and close grip incline. That was it. No bands, no chains, none of that fucking even existed at that time. So it was bare bones, garage gym type stuff. So
you got to see a development of a lot of the cool stuff come across, which
boards,
was actually just
chains.
kind of recycled from Eastern Bloc. You know what I mean? A lot of that, a lot of the chains and stuff.
I wrote an article years ago. It was 100 different. Just off the top of my head, I came up with 100 different things that I saw kind of come in. Some stock, some didn't, come and go. Through that whole time period, from the boards, the chains, the bands, 5-week waves to 3-week waves, percentages going down, all these different things throughout that time period. And it still evolved, and that's what I became infatuated with shortly after he passed, was how did it evolve after I left? So when it moved to West Belt Drive, I was there maybe a year, but then there was a whole evolution that happened past that, which was hard to get access to, because Louie didn't like people talking about what they did, when they trained at Westside. So that's where you didn't have logs and shit like that. Even when I had the site, getting somebody from Westside to keep a training log was not fucking easy to do. It was me and Wendler and Mike Ruggiero. That might have been it. Everybody else, he was one of the type of people that if you got your cover on Powerlifting USA, it was a kiss of death. Right? So all that stuff, was kind of insulated, to be able to make sure the focus is just on kind of what your job is, to be the best powerlifter you can. It was by no means a recreational hobby type thing.
Were you surprised, the attention that Westside drew in the powerlifting culture?
Yeah, because when you're in it, you don't really see what's happening. like, because it's social media thing wasn't really a thing, you know. And every now and again, he had visitors that would start, you know, they kind of were always there to a degree, but it just became more and more and more and more, you know, different coaches and different lifters and would start coming in, and you really don't know the magnitude of it because you don't have a spotlight to see it, you know, so you don't have the social media to see it. Mm-hmm. So in some regards, you think more people are doing it than they are, you know, so there's one misconception, but the other misconception is you think nobody's really using this. But then you slowly start to see that this is being used by, you know, strength coaches all around the world, you know, people from the NFL coming in, all these different collegiate clubs coming in. You're like, holy shit, they're using pieces of this. And you really didn't see how much that was until you look back and then see, you know, and for us, probably less so because it was insulated. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody's got jobs and stuff like that. So it's all your free time is basically evolved around powerlifting. Yeah. So you're not spending time, you know, looking all over to see what else is going on.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, I was probably at 20 when I'm 40, whatever now. Probably 20 years ago. I'm just a kid working at 24-Hour Fitness in Omaha, Nebraska, and someone's like, hey, you should read some of these articles from Westside Barbell.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of crazy because Powerlifting USA was a very small magazine.
Mm-hmm. You know, to be able to find it, you had to go to a bookstore. In Omaha, at least, you had to go to a bookstore.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe 20,000 subscribers.
Yeah, and so it was just crazy, I thought, because I would have never, like, I'm going to Google Westside Barbell. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, like, that's why I asked about, the magnitude, because you never, like, how does it get from Columbus, Ohio to, you know what I mean, to Omaha, Nebraska? It's just crazy the magnitude that it carried.
Well, yeah, I think globally it was kind of like some of these rock bands that are more popular internationally than they are in the U.S. Mm-hmm. It was like that. You know, I think internationally it was way bigger than it was in the U.S. It took the U.S. a little longer for it to pop the way that it popped.
Yeah. I think years ago I remember seeing, it was some seminar for CrossFit. Like CrossFit was kind of starting to take off, and Louie was going around and doing some seminars on like benching and stuff for CrossFit, and then it was like seeing people bringing their own little bags into the gym with like bands from wherever, you know. So now you're at 24-Hour Fitness trying to rig up these fucking bands on these random ass things and trying to like pull and stuff like that. And then I was like, what the fuck is this?
No, I mean, it was, keep in mind I had a Q&A this whole time, right? So the number one question for a fucking decade is, if you don't have a reverse hyper, what do you do instead? I mean, it was so,
you're like copy paste.
Oh my God. You know, Wendler was
what's the answer though?
Pull throughs, you know, JHRs. I mean, there's a standard answer for all that. But Wendler was part of the Q&A for a long period of time, and that was a running joke kind of with all of us. It's like, okay, how many questions are we going to get today? Like, what to do if you don't have a reverse hyper or a glute ham raise? It's like, well, fucking pull throughs, RDLs, you know, da-da-da-da-da. And it was crazy. It's like, you know, you can go back and look at old questions. You know,
no.
I know, but
whoa, hold on.
I did learn something from that whole time period, because you do get asked the same question 1,000 fucking times, and I developed an attitude about it for a while. Like, these fucking people are stupid. Like, you know, why can't they go look? And then somebody pointed out to me, but it's the first time they've ever asked the question, and they're giving you the respect to ask it to you. And I'm like, ooh, shit, that just turned everything on its head. Like, what? Yeah. Wait a minute. Maybe I'm an asshole now. Yeah.
You know? I'm the asshole.
Yeah. So it's like, I am the asshole.
Yeah, it was kind of on that, you know, like Brett and I have done Conjugate-ish stuff for a long time. Like, that's been like my favorite stuff. So kind of looking at, gone along that line of questions and stuff, like looking at how we've observed people do stuff, what is like an aspect that you see where people approach that style wrong, right? They're either missing something, they're leaving something out, they're not doing something right, that really limits their, like, really maximizing of the method or the style.
If I was to have a tier, the top tier would be the dynamic work, right? And that's because the speed work or dynamic work, it's had a lot of backlash against it, maybe rightfully so. But when you look why something works. It may not be working for the reasons why it's stated to work, right? So the dynamic effort method, if you look at that, so a lot of people say that because you're doing it explosively, you're teaching your body to recruit more fast twitch muscle fibers, So kind of going down that route, and taking the stretch reflex out. Maybe not. I'm sure there's studies to kind of cite both, and there's probably more studies to cite the reason why that's bullshit compared to the reason why it's not. But maybe it's not working for that reason. Maybe it's working because the weight is submaximal and allows you to do repeated efforts of repeated first reps. So over 8 or 10 sets of 2, you have 10 first reps, right?
Yeah.
Which is the most important if you're a competitive power lifter. And 2 reps is not that mentally exhausting or physically exhausting. So 2 reps can be done technically very proficient. If you do a heavy set of 5, you start to question what's the 3rd, 4th, and 5th because fatigue will start to set in. So from that standpoint, more than half of that set could be reinforcing poor technique, right? So if you look at this as a skill practice, so forget all the other motor unit shit, all the other stuff, which is predominantly what was being pushed. Let's just forget that. And let's just look at technical acuity. Are you developing better technique in the lift? Compared to the other options, 2 heavy sets of 3, 2 heavy sets of 5, right? So maybe the reason why people got so much out of the dynamic work is because they become technically better at a lift, which we already know to be true, because if you do any kind of seminar or clinic and you bring somebody in and you clean up their lift, many times they could put 50 or 100 pounds on their PR that day.
Yep.
Did they get 100 pounds stronger?
Right.
Fuck no.
No.
They became technically more efficient, right? So and when you deal with a lot of strength training methods, you got to kind of look at first principles in a way. Like, why is this really doing what it's doing? Because it may not be the stated reason why it is.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I think a lot of the disruption comes in. And then some of the other thing they'll do wrong on there, they'll go too heavy. Because percentages are a really hard thing to work for or to prescribe because everybody's different. You know what I'm saying? So if you take, and I did this once with one of my clients. I had a soccer player client of mine that could squat 100 pounds. And I'm like, put 80 pounds on, see how many reps you could do. She did like 30. I'm like, well, what could I do with 80%? 4.
Right.
It's still fucking 80%. But one's way heavier than the other one because the motor patterns are more well developed. So somebody that's more technically efficient is going to be more streamlined in a motor pattern than somebody that's not. So it's kind of like all over the place. Yeah. It's why they can leg press or Smith machine squat more than they can free squat because of that. So with that, there becomes this huge variety. Brandon Smitley says you need this percent. Louie says you need this percent. Matt Winning says you need this percent. Dave's old articles say you need this percent. They're just all fucking throwing shit into the dark. Where the best way to kind of look at that is, especially now, because everybody has phones and they can film things, is if it's a bench press and you can put just a dime per side, right? Mm-hmm. Make this fucking, if you may be a quarter or something like, if you have 65 pounds and you push it as fast as you can, you know what's going to happen. You're going to flip off the bench and shit like that. But if you keep adding a dime per side and keep doing sets of 2, there's going to become a weight that feels like this is good. Like you can explode with it. Your shoulders aren't coming off the pad. You're able to maintain your technique and it's pretty solid and you can see it's solid and you can feel it's solid. Now, if you keep adding a dime each side and keep doing those sets, there's going to also become a weight to where now this is fucking heavy. This is probably too heavy. I can't do this as technically or as fast, with the same type of explosiveness that I can the other ones. Well, that's your fucking starting percent and that's your end percent. Then you break that into 3 weeks, and maybe for you it's 50, 55, 60%. Maybe for somebody else it's 70, 75, 80%, and it's specific to them. And it's fucking easy to do. Yeah. It takes one workout to be able to know what that is. And that may adjust over a period of time. Where my whole time at Westside, I saw the bench percent some of my first speed workouts when I was going up on the weekends were I was using 405 for the 8 sets of 3, and that was based off of 520, so whatever that percent was. By the time I left, it was 185 pounds and 2 chains per side. And the first realization that we saw, and this before bands and chains, is we had like there were 3 different benches. So there was the 500-pound bench, the 400-pound bench, 300-pound bench. And Tim Van Horn was on the middle bench. And they would train with like 315 or something like that. So probably the 400-pound bench, whatever that percent was. He got hurt and his shoulder was bothering him, so he had to drop it to 275. And these were stable waves. There was no waves. It was the same weight all the time.
Okay.
He went to the next meet and broke a PR by 50 pounds. So instead of sitting there and thinking, oh shit, we need to use more weight, we're like, well, maybe we need to use less.
Yeah.
So then percentage dropped down, everybody's lifts went up. So then it was like, well, maybe we need to use less weight again.
Yeah.
To be able to figure out where that was. And going back to the speed workout that I was talking about, just to kind of expand a little bit, if you want to use chains, on top of that, well, the chains completely deload at the bottom. So you don't have to do anything different. Just throw the chains on. Simple.
Yeah.
If you're going to use bands, how much band tension is at the bottom of the bench? And if it's 30 pounds, take 30 pounds off the bar. This is how fucking simple this is. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so it should be light bands, mini bands. I don't give a fuck. What's it take off the bottom?
Yeah.
Take it off that, and then there you go. And it goes from there.
I like it when you were talking about just like, hey, start with some fucking weight, add a little bit more until you slow down. And I was like, huh.
Well, if you look at
simple.
If you look at how any power lifter trains, they are essentially doing what I just said, but over longer periods of time. Right? So some people, if they're using linear, maybe they do chip it back 20 pounds per week for the 8 weeks to go there. Yeah. But over a period of time, they realize, you know what, I do better if it's 30 pounds. So it's a lower starting point, unless you're Ed Cohn. Then it just stays the same all the fucking time.
But he's just like a freak of nature.
No, but I mean, there's a lesson to be learned there too. He found what worked and he just kept sticking with it. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff that he was doing was not conventional at the time. The linear was, but peaking all of his assistance works like bent over rows and stiff legs the same way he was everything else. That wasn't at all. That just stayed like 5s in the strength range or whatever it was. He was taking those, periodizing those exactly the same way as everything else, and would start far enough out. He also started further out than most people back then because nobody wanted to do 12-week cycles, right? Because 5s suck. 8s are even worse. So over a period of time, it's like, fuck the 8s. I'm not going to do the 8s. I'm going to do the 5s. I'll do more 5s. But all 5s really do is prepare you to be able to do triples because by the time you get there, you're like, thank God, I don't have to do 5s anymore. But most lifters over a period of time figure out how to kind of auto-regulate all this stuff, especially the ones that are paying more attention.
Yeah.
Now, when you get into like some of like what you have like a million bars here, if anybody's ever seen or has not seen, they should look. How did you rotate? How would you rotate them? And I know you guys changed them on max efforts, and I remember when I was out there and I talked to Louie, and I was like, "Oh, you change them every 3 weeks?" He's like, "No, I change them whenever I want to." I was like, "Okay." He's like, and his whole thing was, you always have to keep your body guessing. Yeah. But now when you're changing those, then your waves are going to start changing.
We didn't use waves. So on the max effort I did while I was there, okay?
But now would you use them for speed work? I'm sorry, when you're talking about like dynamic.
For speed work?
So now your numbers are going to change, obviously, or would you rather stick with?
Well, if we're changing the bars for speed work, and then the golden rule there is the closer you get to a meet, you're going to want to use the bar that you're competing with.
Sure.
Right? So when you get into the days of Circumax and stuff like that, so that's definitely that same bar. The further you get out is when you would use the different bars. Now, the more technically advanced the lifter was, the more they could stray, and because they weren't going to lose technique, coming from that. So if squatting is completely second nature, then for the most part, some people could probably just use the safety squat bar all the way until the meet, because that's really fucking rare. Really rare. I should probably take that back because nobody should do that I know. Right? It's really fucking rare. But those waves would, the way that I kind of would see it is, you know what you have to do leading into the meet. So whatever the 5 weeks, 8 meets, whatever that is. All that time period after that is like experimental. So that's when you would rotate through different bars, different band, chain setups, whatever it's going to be, because there's a feedback system when you're doing that. So if I do a certain speed phase, right, of a certain bar, and then I start to feel my max effort work is going up or just feels better, I can strain for a longer period of time. I kind of mark that as, okay, this is gold. This goes over here, and I'm going to use this in the 16 weeks leading to a meet. Or the inverse, this feels like shit, the max effort work. Mm-hmm. This goes out, so you're playing around with different things during that time period to see what gold you can find. Then when you find the gold, you fucking bury it and you abandon it. Then you bring it back out in those phases that go into the meet, because you've already seen some dynamic correspondence that plays over to that. So it could be an accessory movement that makes your max effort movement that you've kind of deemed as a good indicator of where everything else is. That makes that go up. Gold, boom. Let's put something else in. Let's see what shit, that feels terrible. That goes out. So in a way, it's kind of the auto regulation again, but it would always show up on whatever that next day was. So if the max effort work on Monday was really fucking demanding, not demanding, but if it was optimal, by the time Friday comes around, my Friday should feel fucking great. If my Friday's still suffering because of Monday, am I out of shape? So you got to go there first. Is my GPV good? Is the rest, nutrition, are all those check boxes checked? Which for most of us, they all were. So that's checked. Okay, shit, this is not a good movement. Off season, find something that's going to be able to do that, but still hard enough that if Monday's max effort day, Tuesday, you still need to feel like you got run over by a bus, because it's max effort, it's hard. Mm-hmm. And for the max effort movement, those were not, this is what I misunderstood about the question from the jump, is those had no rhyme or reason fucking at all. At all.
The max efforts?
No, not at all. It would literally be, sitting in the gym, so normally Chuck or Louie would have been the first one there, but we were waiting until 8:30 for everybody to get there. So while we're waiting, it's like, well, what do you want to do today? Like, I don't know. Like, what do you want to do? I don't fucking know. What do you want to do? This is literally conversations.
It's like going to dinner with your wife.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And every now and again, somebody would come in and say, look, man, I don't give a fuck what we do, but I do not want to do this. Like,
that's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing today.
Yeah. Right? And the lens to which that max effort work was viewed was you're teaching your body to strain.
Yeah.
So the weight's really not relevant, but it is. But that straining is to be able to teach, to be able to grind, to be able to push through. That's the only fucking goal of PRs are definitely part of it, because you want to be able to break PRs. But how the fuck do you, this is where Louie would come in, like, how the fuck do you know? Because you're changing this shit all the time. Then when bands and chains came in, I may not repeat a fucking max effort movement for a year unless it's gold. Like, if it's gold, then I'm going to try to find a way to convince everybody else it's the best thing for them to do too, leading into the meet. But some things like suspended good mornings worked great for a lot of people. My leverages on that fucking were terrible. And my max on it, I sucked at that. My max might have been like 4 fucking plates. And that was with an 800-pound squat, and it was 4 plates with a 950 squat. Obviously, it didn't do shit for my squat. Right? But I would still get stuck in doing it because that's what everybody else was doing for the day, and would get mad as fuck because I would be the suck. I'd be the weakest person there, trying to chip it by a fucking 5 pounds, to be able to do it. And so in hindsight, that may have been more of a recovery day for me because I sucked at it so bad. I never really got sore from it because I couldn't lift enough weights if I could get sore from it.
Mm-hmm. Now, would changing them each week, do you think that gave you the ability to constantly train heavy because it was heavy relative to the exercise you were doing? Yes. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, you're 100% on a safety squat bar is obviously probably not your 100%.
Yes, and there were some things like anything deadlift oriented took longer to recover from. So that didn't come in frequently. So that might have been every 8 to 12 weeks.
Just deadlifting in general?
Pin pulls, deadlifting, whatever it was. Now,
really?
it would be in there, but for most of us, and it was kind of like Louie's rule, you don't need a deadlift to deadlift, and it ended up kind of being true. And as long as you're doing the other things, like a low box safety squat bar, it's kind of the same as a deadlift. Even the stupid suspended good morning that I hate, it's kind of like the same thing, as that deadlift. But that became one of those things that if you did that, Friday probably needed to be a week one of a wave, right? Because it was fucking hard. Now, when the squat cycles became the Circa Max and the bands and all that became insane, then the Monday max ever thing really had to dial back to be more sub-maximal. So for me during those weeks leading into that, if it was good mornings, it would be like 405 for 3 sets of 5. So nothing hard, and easy to where some movements we kind of found like the good mornings, they worked better if it was not singles, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
And so that there was some inherent structure behind what we were doing without really a lot of thought or intention for it, because we just knew this is the wrong time to be doing this and kind of going about that way. Now, when you try to conceptualize that and then show other people what they should do, it becomes this clusterfuck because they want to have all these things specifically put out. And it's like, this whole fucking thing, while it's a template, it's so auto-regulated that it's insane. But any lifter that wants to be great needs to learn how to auto-regulate. And through all the podcasts and all the lifters and all the coaches and everybody that I've spoken to over my whole entire life, that's the number one most important thing for any lifter that wants to get better, is to figure out what they have to do every week, but every day that they're in the gym. So if we use a max effort day, for example, I like to kind of illustrate this. If you have a video game and you got a power meter across the top, optimally you want to start with that being 100% full, but it's never going to be, right? Because you always have systemic fatigue building up. So 90, whatever it's going to be. You do that max effort exercise, how much of that life got taken away? Sometimes it may only have 10% left. You do the reverse hypers and abs and you're fucking done. Sometimes there may be 30%, 40% left. Well, then you're going to do something as a supplemental for 3 to 5 reps, a little bit harder to be able to get that, because you want to be able to use as much of that energy that you have, not sap into it. So it's going to be in a deficit, and not use enough, from that, because you want it to build for that next one. And then as each week goes by, you want to be able to move from one level in Super Mario to the next level in Super Mario. You don't want to have that fucking die and you lose your 3 lives and you got to start all the way over again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a matter of managing that power bar, but also managing your lives.
Yeah.
So you go through there. Now, as you get closer to a meet, you might only have 1 fucking life left, right? And 20% on the power bar, or on the power meter, but you have a deload, to be able to, push that all the way back up again.
Yeah. So when you're talking about trying to bring yourself down to that 10%, 20% or whatever is on that power meter, you would adjust that from workout to workout? So like when you said, the suspended good mornings, like they didn't really tax you that much because you were bad at them. So you have 40% left. So you're going to do supplemental exercises. You're going to do more afterwards for that workout than if you did something else that just fucking crushes you because you were really good at it. That's when you would do. So that would change based on whatever your max effort was.
That day.
Would change
and how I feel. Right. So if I have that main exercise, which is exercise 1, and then the second exercise would be called supplemental. So the supplemental is more in that 3 to 5 rep range, and then after that's the accessory stuff, right? So that second exercise, that supplemental, may be glute ham raises, right?
Yeah.
So if it is that suspended good morning within those glute ham raises, I'll probably be more elevated and then using more weight and then pushing those harder in, you know, a 5 rep range or 4 to 6, hard, heavy, right? Now, if that was low box squats with a safety squat bar and it took more, now that glute ham raise may drop down and it just be body weight, you know, for sets of 8 to 10 and into there. So it's kind of regulated based upon all that because that power meter, by the time, if Monday's max effort squat, you have max effort bench on Wednesday. I need that high enough to be able to bench.
Yeah.
And if I sap that too much into a deficit, but then I go into the bench day, instead of having 70, 80%, I'm at 20%, my bench is going to fucking suffer.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the gauge is the next workout.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that it's also the question of if it's max effort. This is true for dynamic as well, right? So on dynamic days, sometimes we work up afterwards. Right. So if it feels good, but at a certain point, you got to ask yourself, if I keep going up and do this, and then how's that going to impact Monday? Or how's it going to impact my bench on Sunday? Are my forearms going to be all fucked up? Or how's it going to impact Monday? But you're usually looking at Sunday. Like, this is good. It feels cool. Everything's good. We're good. We can push fucking hard. This is getting to be a little bit of a grind. I can push this, but I may have to strip things out this back end of this day to be able to be ready for Sunday. So it's maximizing what you're doing at that time while also keeping an eye on what's next.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and that gauges everything because it could be as simple as I really want to fucking do this. I really do. Right? It's all ego.
But knowing you're going to do that, you gotta draw back the rest of it.
Well, not draw back the rest of it. Perhaps not bench the way I want to bench on that next day.
Okay, so your next day.
So if my ego gets the best of me, and it's like I'm going to feed my fucking ego, and it's a max effort day on Monday or whatever it's going to be, then maybe that I'm not going to be able to push as hard on Wednesday for the bench. Can that just simply be not having to do the accessories the same way that I would? Or is it going to have to be I need to find a way to convince people to do like a 3 board, which is pretty fucking easy to recover from, instead of a floor press.
Yeah.
You know.
So when you do that, if you have one of those days that just, you know, your main max effort fucking crushes you down to your 10, 20, and like you said, you do reverse hyper abs and you're out because you're fucking spent, would you then look to come in for like a mini workout to do some additional hamstring, some additional back work, or you're like, no, like I spent, I used up everything, I'm good, and you just move on?
If it's me and that type of day happen, as soon as I leave, my process is I need to eat as much as I possibly can. You know, I need to get in a fuck ton of carbohydrates. I don't care what it is. Donuts, I don't fucking care.
Yeah.
I need to eat as much as I possibly can. I need to do everything I can possibly do to try to recover the best I can. If I wake up the next day and I would have a feeling like I got run over by a truck, not really muscle soreness, just like, fuck, I got run over by a truck. Yeah. If it's that, plus there's a lot of muscle soreness, then I would look at if I drag a sled or if I do like a mini workout or whatever it is it going to be able to have me move after that training session with better mobility than if I didn't do that training session, right? Because that training session there can still have a demand as well.
Yeah.
Because it's easy for those things to get out of hand.
Yep.
Right? So the goal is to never have to do those.
Yeah.
Right? But sometimes your conditioning will fall. Back then I would use a sled or something like that to be able to bring it back up again. Now I would probably just use a treadmill or walk more, you know, different, something a little bit easier than having to fucking get a sled out and do all that stupid shit.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say working the soreness out because it really doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's probably more placebo than anything else, but it still kind of comes back into if it's needed and I think it's going to help, then I'll implement it. But is it going to impact the next day?
Yeah.
And for me, sometimes, because I did work as a trainer for a lot of this time period as well, it could just be, this was more so on the upper body on the bench days where the main exercise and the supplementals were pushed really hard. It's like, I'll just do this other shit later. You know, I'll break it out of the main workout and I'll either do it later that day, the push down, flats or whatever it's going to be, or I'll just do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, the day after.
Yeah.
Because to me, if I tried to push it all in that same time frame, that's going to be harder to recover from, which is then going to impact Friday.
Yeah.
Which the goal is to be able to go into every day, optimized, but to still do the work that you need to do and have that increase over time.
Yeah. So if you smoke yourself and then your accessories are going to take another 20%, if you do on that day, that's going to bring you down to 0 or negative. You're like, nope, fuck it. If that next day doing those accessories, because you've recovered a little bit, maybe they're only going to cost you 10%. And you can do them there because you're getting that work in, but you're not digging that deficit that's just going to totally fuck you for.
But you have to be honest with yourself throughout this whole process too, because it's really simple, and you see a lot of lifters make the same mistake now. It's really simple to peel shit out and get stronger, right? That's kind of what we do before a meet. It's called peaking.
Yeah.
Right? Well, some people will inherently peak without knowing that's what they're doing. And then they'll tell you, man, I used to do all these accessories. Now I do a fucking thing and I'm way stronger. Yeah, because you're doing exactly what you do before a fucking meet. Tell me about how this goes 4 months from now. Because now your work capacity is going to drop.
Yeah.
And you will get to a level you can't even recover from the things that you're doing. So you have to have a certain level of work capacity to be able to do the work. Where one area where I never really got Louie's full interpretation of what that is where does the work capacity end? Because we're not fucking MMA fighters. We don't have to be able to have this crazy CrossFit work capacity. We're fucking powerlifters. So at what point is the optimal work capacity?
Yeah.
The answer, I suppose, is easy as long as you can do all your training sessions and be able to progress. It's easy. But anything after that, I'm like, what the fuck's the point?
Yeah.
Like, why do you need 18 workouts if, the 4's doing it?
Yeah.
You don't need more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I assume with your conditioning, when you were personal training people, your stand to lean ratio had to be pretty high. Finding places to lean or sit down when you're training people.
Yeah. Yes. I would still be interested to know what my steps actually were.
Like sub 4,000.
Oh yeah. Because I try to avoid lower back pumps and all that shit at the time, but I bet my step count was probably still higher than what I think it was. The worst thing about that is, thank God for ESPN, because you have something to fucking watch. A lot of the times it's just gem pop. So do 3 sets on this machine and whatever. You just go to the next machine, whatever. It's just,
Gen pop.
Yes, I trained very few athletes. It was a corporate fitness center, so it was kind of brutal at times.
After you kind of bought into Conjugate and Westside and that, did you just pretty much primarily train that?
Yes.
Afterwards, you were just
I wanted to know everything about it at that point. It's like, why in the fuck does this work? You know, and from the first principles, like why does it work? That may not be why it works, right? Yeah. Because keep in mind, I'm online answering questions too, or if I'm going out and doing seminars, there's always going to be somebody that's going to hit me with a question that I haven't thought about, or they're going to say this doesn't work for a reason I haven't considered, right? Gotcha, and I have to, is on the pulpit of pushing this cult agenda, I have to be able to have a decent answer for what all these things are, because a lot of the things like I said, may not have worked for the reasons that they said they worked. Yeah. And a lot of the things were, and I think Mike Israel made a really good video a decade ago, I don't know, it's when he was with Renaissance Periodization, basically criticizing Westside. And it pissed a lot of people off. But I'm watching, I'm like, that's a point. He's making all good points. But we were countering all those. It was phasic. Even though Louie was saying it's not phasic, it's fucking a 3-week wave. It's phasic. You know what I'm saying? It's like, just because. So the responsibility then comes on, those of us that were putting the content out. Yeah. Where if this is being exposed by somebody that really knows the stuff, then this is a gap that we haven't filled, from the education side. And if they know it, then this is also being misunderstood by everybody that's trying to apply it. And that's probably why it's not working for them. Right? Because if we're to strip it down, and again, all these things are kind of the same. It's all the same. But if we're to strip it down and say, here's this linear periodization, right? No matter who the person is, there's a way to auto-regulate and to change the variables of that to make it work for anybody. Yeah. Block training's the same way. Conjugate's the same way, right? But when they're put in their own paradigms, right? Then it becomes hard for people to kind of to see that. So their answer is conjugate doesn't work. I'm going to go do the linear. Or linear doesn't work. What I did. Linear doesn't work. I'm going to do conjugate, right? And kind of jump that way. Where I mean, I still would have done the whole jump anyhow. But I could have just fixed my fucking original program. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew enough about what didn't work.
Yeah.
It's just maybe I didn't need fucking 8-week waves. Maybe it was too much. Maybe 3-week or 5-week and so forth.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of on that, I look at a lot of people now, I'll see, and I think a lot of people like just think they're reinventing the wheel. Like I think overall training is very similar across the board. Like you were saying, you know what I mean? Nobody's coming up with some new crazy method of doing anything. But then I also get people who will deny, like you'll talk to them about any kind of conjugate stuff and they're like, well, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, everything works.
Yeah.
If you do it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they'll do a program for 2 or 3 weeks and be like, well, that program didn't work. I switched programs, you know?
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts? Like, I just think that training, you know, the way I said training is always evolving. And I'm not going to disagree with that, but I just think some stuff, if you regulate it right, works for a very long time.
I would say the application of training is always evolving, right? So there's no doubt the lifters of today are stronger than the lifters of 20 years ago.
Oh, for sure.
And there's going to be no doubt that we're going to see the same thing moving forward. Because globally across the board, 2 things are happening. You got a larger number of people coming in. So you've increased the talent pool. Right, so more of the genetic outliers are going to come in. But how do you know you're not a genetic outlier unless you've tried for 10 years, right? So you don't really know that. So that's happening. But what's also happening is a lot of the shit that everybody agrees across the board is stupid shit is being eliminated from the next group that comes through. Probably more exponentially now because social media, where I can bitch about it, but there's good parts too, where it's easier to be able to see. Maybe you don't want to max out every single time you go in the gym. That whole thing, I mean, that used to be a thing. But right now, that's kind of like, pretty much everybody agrees that's probably not fucking smart to do.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of those things have kind of gone by the wayside because while we can joke about it, you can still look back 30 years. And if it was somebody's, you know, phase of 3s, whatever it's going to be in there, if it's a linear type thing, how many times did it feel really good that day? And instead of sticking to the percent they did, they just went 20, they threw 40 more pounds on and kind of went. That happened a lot. That probably doesn't happen at all, you know, anymore because they see this is going to impact the next week. At the granular levels we talked about each day, I think most people are at least looking at how's this going to impact the next week, you know, and going from that, where that wasn't even a fucking thing. For a long time, it was like, no, we just grind our dick in the dirt
smashing the wall
every fucking day and then hope that we recover by the next training session. If we don't, we just eat more and take more drugs, right? And so, you know, so you start to filter. So that part is that evolves, you know, from the trials and errors of the people that came before, the same way I benefited from the people that came before.
Yeah.
You know, and through that way. To your point, are there new methods or anything like? No, probably not. There's new ways to coin the old method.
Yeah, I would say nobody's reinventing the wheel.
Yeah. I mean, it's still going to come down to, you know, stimulating, and then auto-regulating the stimulus to be able to recover the best you can and find ways to be able to increase over a period of time and do so in a way that will extend, if they're serious, extend the career as long as they possibly can. Because outside of those genetic outliers, it's going to take longer than people think, right? So if this is going to be 15 years to be able to basically hit your peak potential, and there's really no ifs, ands, or buts or ways around all that, you don't want to get to 12 years and be so fucked up that you can't maximize those last 2, where I think I did that. Where had I had 2 more years healthier, my numbers would have been way better than what they were. But because of all that stupid shit, you know, earlier on and so forth, all those fucking mistakes begin to chip down, you know, that longevity of that time period. But you still got to stimulate enough to be able to, it's a fucking tight balance, man. So it's kind of moving like crunching in at the same time, you can't be too much of a puss that then the maximum potential never comes.
Yeah.
But
They can't get stupid either.
yeah, I mean, the first part is they got to decide that's what they want to do for real, right? Otherwise, it's, I'm speaking all from the context of somebody that this is not recreational.
Yeah.
They want to be the best at what they possibly can. There's a whole subcategory, which is way bigger, by the way, way bigger, of the people that it's just recreational, it's hobby, it's fun, and that's great. That's the majority of the sport. This conversation really doesn't apply.
Yep.
Right? Because they may say they are, but they're really not that concerned with maximizing their peak potential.
Yeah.
They're concerned with, hitting a good potential that they feel really good at being able to hit, but haven't crossed that. And nothing wrong with that, right? Because there's more people that do that than not, right? And that's what supports the sport more than anything else. But that's a different category, right? So with them, it's still all about having fun. I mean, if you're not having fun, don't fucking do it, right? But when it becomes that other pursuit, it's not always fun.
Right.
And not at all. There's fun periods, but a lot of it just sucks.
Yeah.
Because that's just what it is.
Yeah. I'm curious to see this next generation. So, like, as they're training and they're auto-regulating, but, like, so much more emphasis on prehab work and, like, not getting injured, I think, is going to extend these people. Like, I think when we were training, at least when I was going, like, it was not like, oh, man, I hope it's like, when am I going to get hurt? It wasn't a question. Like, everyone doing it was going to do something. Like, you're going to tear something. You're going to get hurt. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen. And now I think that mentality shift a little bit from hopefully from some of us just getting the shit kicked out of us, that people go, oh, I don't want to look like that when I put my shoes on.
Yeah, I think that will have an impact. I don't think it's as big as what you think it is.
Okay.
I would say the difference is, the people that I've trained with going all the way back, to 82 was kind of like, this fucking hurts. Fuck it. We're doing it. If it tears, it tears. Fuck it. I mean, to the point where you strain a pec and it's like, fuck it, I'm doing another one. Whatever. Right. That's probably not right. They're probably not doing that anymore, So I think what's the bigger catalyst is the nutrition, to where, if you look at how the nutritional trends have changed throughout strength sports in general, it's way different than it was before. The importance on rest and recovery is way different than it was before. You can attest to this in every gym across the. How many times have you had a morning training session on the weekend and half the people reeked like alcohol because they were out all night? I don't think we're seeing that as much as what we saw before, especially if they're in that serious group. They're dialed in more so. It may not be like bodybuilder dialed in, and it doesn't need to be. Yeah. But they're more fucking dialed in than let's just grab a couple cheeseburgers and a Coke on the way to fucking the gym, not even thinking about it.
That is awesome, though.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, and that's probably going to increase the longevity because their recovery is going to be better, because a lot of those injuries are probably stemming because their recovery is tapped because their energy bars tanked all the time, and they're just hoping the fuck they have the 20% to do the one heavy lift when they go in, and if they don't, they just fucking snort Coke and take fucking meth or drink a gallon of caffeine to get that extra 5% to be able to go through. I don't think that's anywhere near the scale is what it was with the groups that I were kind of around.
I love the analogy of the energy bar. Like, I guess subconsciously I've thought about that, but like ideally you want your energy bar to start at 100, right? And then I think you want it to go to 0, and then you want to get back to 100 before you train again. Like, that would be
100 would be a little unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, but you want it to be as close to 100 as you can, and then you end up as close to 0 as you can when you're training. But then before your next one, you're back up as close to 100.
And that will chip down as the meat prep, which is nothing. That was a kind of a word that took me a while to get used to what that actually means. I'm in prep. Like, what the fuck does that mean? You're a power lifter. You're always in prep. I never really fucking understood that. Yeah. But, as each one of these weeks and the meat gets closer, your max may only be 65.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is going to be a cumulative systemic fatigue because the load is getting higher week after week after week, which that's going to happen. Yeah. And that's part of the whole process of the whole thing, where at the end of the day, I remember when we'd have all the sponsored lifters going to the WPO, and what I would tell all of them is within 100, 150 pounds, maybe even 200 pounds on total, right, with people you compete against, the healthier lifter going in, nobody's going to be totally healthy, but the healthier lifter going in is usually going to be the one that's going to win. And more times than not, the person who was the strongest wasn't the one that won. Because something's jacked up or something's fucked up or they injured something at the meet or whatever variable came into play. But typically the one that always was at the top was the one that was, when you talk to them, was the healthier person going in. Healthier.
Health is not necessarily the word, but healthier.
Yeah, because everybody's going to get dinged up a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about like the generations, getting stronger, what do you see as like the upper limit? Like, we've seen the raw 1,000-pound squats, and what do you think the upper limit is?
I don't think we can even comprehend what that is, because science is going to change too. So drugs are going to change as well. So.
What do you think the human body has a limit?
No. I mean, I remember having a conversation in high school and it was this was before Anthony Clark benched, 600, something like that. I think who was the person that benched 600 going way, way back. But 700 pounds was just completely, even in gear, was uncomprehendable. Just not doable. And the 1,000-pound squat used to be a handful of people, and now we got people. The one dude, didn't he almost break the all-time multiply world record in 242 raw? It's fucking ridiculous. So I don't think we're close, right? And add to that we have this larger talent pool coming in, where I can go back in hindsight and say that this doesn't take anything away from people like Ed and people like that. Here's a genetic outlier that worked really fucking hard, right? Mm-hmm. You can kind of go back in time if you've been around and spot who those people were. Ed, Sean Franco, Gene Bell. I mean, you can just kind of, because they're not everybody.
No.
Right? But they're not a lot, right? And that's coming from a very small pool, of total lifters, where it was 20,000. If we go back 20 years ago, on open powerlifting, there might be 250,000 that competed last year.
Yeah.
You're going to get more of those people coming in.
Yeah.
That in itself is going to create more competition, and the more they compete with each other, the higher the bar is going to be raised, where the WPO kind of did that. And then in a multiply sphere, and I would say it's probably more competitive now. It may not be the number of people per weight class if you go back to the 80s, like the YMCA nationals and so forth, and 220s and 242s like stacked, where it may not be like that. But there was a large period of time where the best weren't necessarily competing with the best. I don't want to say they were avoiding each other, but potentially some were.
Kind of cherry picking.
Yes. Where now, these top lifters want to compete against the other top lifters. And the more that happens, the more that bar gets raised. Because as soon as you see somebody do a number you didn't think that you were capable of doing, and the person, and you see him walking around, that shit becomes real fast. You're like, well, if he can fucking do it, then why can't I? Right? And for a pretty long time period, I don't think that was happening to the same degree as what we see now. So I think, what is the top potential? I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, we might be a little ways off. For a while there, we were running into it with a geared lifting. We were running into bar constraints.
Yep.
But now we got slim plates and stuff like that. So I don't think we're going to run into bar constraints like we kind of had with Brent Mikesell and stuff like that in the past. But those were York hundreds. Where if they would have used kilo plates, they probably wouldn't have needed to have a longer bar and so forth. But I think it's higher than what we can comprehend it is. I really do.
It's going to be amazing. Like you said, you have more people coming into the sport. I think social media gives people better guidance if they're smart about it earlier on. So like when we're just in the gym fucking around, like learning, like, oh, well, that guy's kind of jacked. I'm just going to do what he does. But now I'm like, oh, I like powerlifting. I have all these resources so I can fine tune my training earlier. Like you said, if it takes 15 years, but I can start that 15-year training cycle at 16, 17, 18 rather than 25. Like,
well, you got to keep in mind too. There's another variable out there that hasn't happened yet, right? To where when going way back, lifters trained in crews and they would drive, 3 hours to be able to squat with each other and so forth. That's not so much the case now.
No, not at all.
Okay. Now, at some point in time, I do believe that will become the case again. What do you think is going to happen when that happens? Because now they're not only meeting up just when they compete, they're going to be training with each other, which what do you think the outcome of that is going to be? That's going to push even more so. And I think that's just a matter of time until that happens. As the world becomes more digital, right? At some point in time, there's going to be a tipping point where people are going to crave it's social interaction.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if you're a lifter, what's the best place for the social interaction?
Yeah.
Gyms.
Yep.
Right. And we will become more and more digital. Right. So that's only going to become that catalyst to where, home gyms are kind of a fad now. They probably always will be. But a lot of that's going to start to come back, into one of the best businesses to probably be in is going to be restaurants, bars, and gyms, where social interaction happens because it will.
And you can only get so good on your own.
Yes.
I think you can only push yourself so far.
Yes.
You have some of those those weird anomalies out there that can train by themselves and do crazy shit, like a Blaine Sumner or something like where he would train by himself.
Yes.
Right.
And that will always exist because it always has existed.
Yeah, there's always an outlier.
But it's just a matter of time, to where this pops, and then there's the new Westside Barbell and the new, whatever other fucking gyms were out there. My brain just fucking farted on me, but Sean Franco, Big Iron, different gyms, or Pacifico or Blacks, and it's just a matter of time until boom, here it happens, and it may be in the underbelly right now, and it's just that's where I see the next big leap coming. Is we haven't needed it, so because we haven't needed it to be able to do that, it's coming.
Yeah.
So you powerlifted up through, when did you do your last meet?
2003, 2004.
And then when did you go, so it was before that obviously, because you started Elite in 98?
Yeah.
So when did you really decide, was it part of the business you wanted to just, you knew you had the injuries were stacking up in powerlifting, but where you were like, I need to give more time to the business, was that any part of it?
That was a part of it. Most of it, though, was injury related. So that was kind of like the tipping point because there were a lot of things going on. The birth of my first child was one, right? Because the personal training thing, being in the gym from 6 o'clock in the morning and then getting home at 10, and outside of traveling to Westside and back, that was pretty much every day. Mm-hmm. And I was a latchkey kid, which is fine. I probably look at that more as an asset, but I wanted to be around more than say what my father was. Not that he was a bad father in any way whatsoever, but I wanted to be around more. So I didn't see the feasibility in that. So that was one aspect, and having the child on the spectrum kind of played into that as well. Then on the other aspect was the business, because I really didn't give a fuck. It's like whatever. When we get in at 10:30. We'll work until whatever it is. That would still be late at night, so I'm not going to downplay hours or anything like that. It just was kind of ridiculous. And then the third was I couldn't grab a bar anymore, so the shoulder was fucked. So those two things are playing in the background, and then being told I need a shoulder replacement and knowing that that's the end of the line, right? I was scavenging for people that came back from that, and it was like, no. I couldn't even find people that had success getting range of motion back. And so the last meet that I did, and I was totally complacent, Louie had this brilliant idea that what if we, because he was fucked up too, what if we only use the safety squat bar and go to the straight bar the last 3 weeks? I'm like, fuck yeah, because they would have to wedge my arm in there and it was off center and shit. Well, that'd be great. Might have been had I done fucking any mobility or put a broomstick on my back or fucking something. But by the time that time came around, it was gone. I couldn't even get to the bar, even if they cranked it back underneath there. So it's like, okay, now I can only bench and whatever, that's back in the days where bench only was not a power lifter. It's like my bench wasn't that fucking great anyhow. So this is over, and so those all kind of played into it. And then I also didn't want to be the beat up fucking guy that was hanging around the gym, where there was some disagreements between Louie, with that. Right. So, and I get it, I do, but with other things, it was like, okay, I got to just walk, from here and devote the time into trying to figure out how to run a business. That was kind of a key thing, and scale or grow it the best I possibly can. And that's going to require more time than, not necessarily the time priority. It's going to have to become a higher priority than where it was, because it was training, then maybe business, and then family. It's like I have to reprioritize my life, to where it's going to be at that point. It's probably business first, then family, and then training would fall after that. So it was, and it's a tough time too. I don't want to downplay that, because there's an identity crisis that kind of comes with that, because that's who you were, or who I was forever, since I was 12. It was the number one priority. Now, what the fuck? Now what do I do? And so it was a weird time, because the business is kind of structured around the sport in a way that you kind of want to just get the fuck away from it all, but you can't.
You're locked into it.
You're just stuck. And it's like, I don't want to be stuck in this shit. Because you go through like the stages of grief. It's like, I hate this shit. You know what I'm saying? Because I can't fucking do it. I hate it. I don't want to be around it, but fuck. I'm around it every fucking day talking about this stuff. And it took a while to kind of process and to work through all that, to be able to find a different passion for it than it was before.
Yeah. And then when you kind of went full, I know your kind of slogan or mission was always live, learn, pass on. Kind of going to where you kind of came up with that. Actually, you know what? Let's go back to Matt and I were talking about it earlier, the EliteFTS. And what did the FTS? Because I don't know if that's the focus, trust, strength you use.
I rebranded it to that.
Because what was the FTS originally? Because I know wasn't this Tracy's like personal training or something she had going?
Well, yeah. It was originally set up as that. So
okay.
I just took that. It was Elite Fitness Systems is what it was. And a few things kind of transpired over a period of time. One was a legal case, a trademark case, with Elite Fitness Systems, which was a fucking disaster to be able to work through. Expensive as fuck. But at the same time, people online abbreviated it. So I didn't come up with the EliteFTS. It's just what people were writing online and on forums and stuff. And as soon as I started to see that happening over and over again.
That's crazy. Because we were literally like, I wonder where that came from.
Yeah. It's like, at that point, it's like, okay, let's trademark this. Even though it is kind of a shitty name, because for a lot, it is. Because you would tell people EliteFTS and they're like, what the fuck? They'd be like, oh, fuck, it's Elite, F as in Frank, T as in Tom, S as in Sam. And saying that for years, I'm like, this is shitty marketing.
Who came up with this?
Yeah, like this FTS needs to mean something better than that. So what are the values? And that's where it's like F is in focus, T is in trust, S is in strength. But the name was essentially created as what they call an acronym that everybody abbreviated it to, which was great, right? Because the hardest thing to do is come up with a fucking name of a business, right? I just needed like a holding company to be able to run money through for the personal training that I was doing and what my wife was trying to do at that time. The Live, Learn, Pass On came when I did engage into the business at the time that we're talking about. And I was profiting net maybe about $500 a month. So it wasn't a lot. So we were living off my wife's income. And while still training some clients, so it's kind of in there. But when it became profitable enough that I could invest in a business consultant, I hired the company was associated with the E-Myth at the time. So it was a 4-year program. And the first part of that program is creating your aim. What is the aim of the company? And that's a bigger question than people think, because it's kind of like, well, what is your purpose in life or whatever it is?
Your why.
And it took a few months to really kind of dig into that. And where it kind of came from is because it's education and media based, and my whole life was evolved around strength training, but also, working with crews and helping other people get stronger. And as I came up through, even as a teenager in that gym, nobody was charging me for what they were teaching me, ever. Nobody. My wrestling coach that had a significant impact on my life, all these other people, if it's just one statement or something that they said at the right time in the right situation, it's life-changing. An example would be, I sucked at wrestling for several years, and my mom was late picking me up one day, and I'm just running the stairs, and lights are all off, and for whatever reason, she was fucking late. Coach walks by and like, what the hell are you doing? Because it's probably 45 minutes. And I said, you know what? I'm just fucking tired of getting beat all the time. He said, well, I'll tell you what, if you work harder than everybody else, you'll never feel beaten again. That changed my fucking life, because it's like, okay, if I just work harder than everybody else, even if I fall short, I'm not going to feel like I was beaten. What did he pay? He didn't pay me. I didn't pay anything for that. He didn't have to say that. And there's all those little markers that were kind of leading up through all the way into Louie, helping me in the warm-up room of different places and helping me at meets and embracing me, come to Westside Barbell. I mean, when I first got there, we paid like $20 a month for heat, but we never paid him for fucking coaching or all the other kind of stuff, so that became what that aim was. Like, I kind of owe all these fucking people, right? Forget about the business accolades and all the other stuff. I owe every one of those people just because I was able to realize what I love to do in powerlifting at a level higher than I thought I could do. I really did think I was at that genetic peak for a long fucking time. Then I find out it was way higher, right? Which means you're capable, and everybody's capable of doing more than they currently are doing. They just haven't given themselves permission to be able to do that, right? So that became, this is the founding aim of what this company is. If we don't, no matter what we do, right, financially successful or not, if we're able to help people to realize that, to a level that can change their life the way other people have been able to change mine, then I'm cool with that. Even if we fucking go out of business or whatever, that's enough. That's good. And over the years, what I've seen, and this is more than satisfying. I wish there was more financial satisfaction. I'm not going to
obviously.
But when I'm seeing people that, the company has been able to help elevate, in their own lives, and now they've helped elevate other people in their lives. This is generational at this point now, to where I'm hearing from people now that will say, say one of the original sponsors, they're working with a coach that was somebody that original sponsor helped, all the way down into this bottom, this other tier, which just, as long as that keeps happening, us as a species of meathead, which I'm proud to say, will continue. Because the last thing I want to see is the evaporation of the fucking meathead, right? Because that, for a lot of people, it's more affordable, it's more accessible, it's a way to change their lives through the gym that will always be there, that's kind of always been there, that's always accessible to everybody to whatever degree that they're at. And one of the worst things that I saw happen for me, because it scared the fuck out of me, is when this whole online coaching shit started. Because I'm like, fuck, this is going to destroy all this. But it didn't. It actually probably helped it. So what my greatest fear was, this is fucked up, right? Because this shit should be, passed on. But it still does, right? It's just people have found a way, to basically monetize it, which for a lot of people, there's still shitty coaches. I don't want
plenty.
There's probably more shitty ones than there are good ones. But that will go away too in time. But But now for the good ones, it's incentivized them to be able to help even more people, right? Because the really good ones can't build a client base unless they're helping other people and putting good content out to be able to help other people online. Otherwise, they're stifled in their reach of what they can do to the 4 people that they might see in a gym, which is still great. Mm-hmm. It's still probably to some degrees, at some levels, better. It's kind of on a pendulum. Yeah. And so once that purpose was in mind, then it was building a strategic objective and, how to move forward from there. And it was all the same shit that I knew from training. Because at that point, it's like, okay, what's the objective? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And then what are the indicators, max effort lifts, accessory lifts, that are going to drive to be able to hit those strategic objectives, your squat, bench, deadlift. So I was able to relate all that back into what the business is. And then if you're tracking shitty indicators and you don't get the results you want, it's because your indicators are shitty. You need to find the things that have the correspondence to the squat, bench, and deadlift and track those and then plug those in to be able to move from there, and then realize most of the shit you do isn't going to work. Same way in training. Like, we can probably go back through all of our training and really dissect it apart and realize most of the shit we didn't have to do.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't. I don't want to say it's 80-20 rule, because I've not seen that really apply to anything, but enough.
Yeah.
A lot of it. And so that's where that came from, because at that time, once you establish core values, which are going to relate back to who you are and how you were raised and so forth. Once you have the aim and the core values, then you have the base to be able to grow from there, right? And no matter what happens, as long as you're able to stick to those, and it's a sliding scale, just like any value is going to be. Well, you want to say your value is always right there at that 0, not -1, not +1. It's a neutral. There's going to be times you're going to fuck up, and it's going to be a -4. You got to course correct to the 0. But you can't course correct or even move into the positive unless you know what the fuck it is.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you know what it is, and if you start feeling stressed, then you're probably stressed because you're violating one of the core values, where if you can get that back to neutral, then everything's back at its base and you can be able to move from there. So it's being able to correspond all this shit back into what training was the biggest tool from that. So that was probably the most important thing that I did business-wise, because it rooted all that. Now I can look back in hindsight and say, if I had more of a financial objective, I maybe could be retired right now and not have to worry about it. But how many of those values would have violated? So it's a fucked up thing to process through your head. It really is. Because maybe I could have been a fucking sellout or whatever you want to call it and be fucking retired. But would I have reached that aim?
Yeah.
That I'm trying. I don't give a fuck about legacy or any of that kind of shit. I don't care. Nobody's going to. I don't. I think it's one of the dumbest fucking things people can talk about, because 10 years after you're dead, nobody's going to fucking even remember you were alive. Right? Louie had a giant impact, right? But how often do you think his name is in everyday discourse with most strength coaches across the world now? Right? There's nothing. It should be. Right? But this is just the fucking fact of being alive and being a human. Over a period of time, unless you're fucking Jesus or Socrates, nobody's going to remember who the fuck you are 100 years from now. Yeah. So why do you give a fuck about this legacy when you should take care of the people that are around you now? Because a lot of people do that in contrast to the people that are around them now, to what they think they're going to be remembered for later on, to where they ain't going to be remembered for a fucking thing. They're going to be dead. Nobody's going to give a fuck. They're going to care about the people. They're going to care about that. So that was a little bit of a tangent. God, I miss fucking ranting.
I was going to say, it's one of the most beautiful, pure mission statements of just hey, listen, I got so much awesome help, guidance, everything for free that I'm not going to turn around and sell that to people.
No, and
I'm just going to pass that shit on. Just giving it
you
away.
Have no idea how hard it was to sell the first ebook. No idea.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, back at that time, that was kind of like the fucking blowhard. You had to know the industry back then. It's like, oh, here this fucking slapdick with a fucking ebook.
Another ebook.
Yeah, and this fucker would say he's making $1 million off of it and all that kind of shit. And then once we started putting ebooks out, and I saw outside of like 531s, you know, some rare other ones, most of them didn't sell for shit. You didn't even gather enough to pay for the editing and the fucking cover design. You know, then I realized these guys are all full of shit, right?
Yeah.
The industry is, God, how did I used to say this? The fitness industry, it's kind of like fucking, at least in porn, you see people getting fucked. With investments, you know you're going to get fucked, right? And the fitness industry, you're just getting fucked, but you don't know you're getting fucked, and you don't expect to get
You're not
fucked,
having fun.
but you're getting fucked, right? That's kind of how the whole industry works. At least in other ones, you know, and it's a fucked up industry.
Now, when you got in it, because it's a niche market.
Yeah.
And you guys do, I mean, you have something for everybody. You guys sell something. It doesn't matter if you're bodybuilding, if you're just want to buy a sled, drag around your yard.
If you can put it in a gym bag or load a plate on it, we probably have it.
Now, was it, and like I was kind of talking, like Matt and I were talking about, like, even like our gym, we're a very niche gym. We try to have something for everybody, but everyone's like, oh, you guys are that powerlifting gym. Well, no, we have something for everybody. Do you ever look back and, obviously you don't have any regrets, but like, do you think it would have been different if you would have went with like a Perform Better model or something like that? You know what I mean? Where you're just selling shit to fitness clubs. You know what I mean?
Maybe because
just hit a broader spectrum of people.
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality that most people just can't wrap their head around is when open powerlifting came out, right? That created a database. You know, basically now of every lifter that's ever competed. Mm-hmm. It's open source, so you can download that database. I can take that database and compare it to my customer database. Total revenue since we've been in business, the competitive powerlifter makes up less than 5% of the total revenue. Total customers, 3.5% of total revenue, right? So I joke and say as soon as they do a meet, they're fucking gone as a customer, right? Because the stats kind of show that, right? But as somebody that's come up through the sport and somebody that's been embedded in the sport and other people that have been embedded in the sport, we see the sport as those people that do meets, right? That's not the full sport. People who train like powerlifters, like what we used to call closet bodybuilders, right? Mm-hmm. You know, people train like bodybuilders that didn't compete.
Yeah.
That number is fucking huge. Huge. And it's only keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? That's the customer base, right? That's the demographic. That's most of your members, right? They know they don't have any aspirations to compete, but they're drawn to those lifts. Or strongman lifts. The strongman would kind of play into the same thing. They're drawn to those because they're easy to quantify, they're easy to measure, and they're relatively easy to learn, right? So it fits. You don't get any easier than that than just fucking not machine circuits.
Sure.
I mean, there's really nothing that much easier that's challenging, that's fulfilling, that fits that aim, that fits that purpose. If there is a mistake that I've made over the years, it's marketing too deep to that market.
Sure.
You know, for instance, having all the sponsors being competitive lifters. That wasn't representative of who our customer base is. Like a First Form model would be the model, or Gem Shark, right? Their premier people that they have as spokesmen, sponsors, whatever it is, are the normal people, right? That embrace that lifestyle, that First Form or whatever it's going to be, where the marketing in hindsight, looking back, should be the people that embrace those lifts and then showcasing them. That way it has more connection to who the market actually is, instead of looking at it as being aspirational, that everybody's going to aspire to try to be like these multiply powerlifters with bloody noses and all this other kind of shit, you know, which wasn't necessarily the case financially, you know, from that. But it's tough, man, because it's my roots. That's my
It's your bread and butter that you grew up with.
Yeah.
It's the balance of the whole thing, so it's a weird one, it's because you can pivot, and go that direction, but it's a weird sport. It really is. I think it's better now, but for a long time it was cannibalizing itself, even within divisions. Like how many multiply, for instance, when I came in, may have represented 20% of the sport, 30% of the sport. So if, say, in the way I did this, if there's 20,000 Powerlifting USA subscribers, that's probably how many lifters they are. And back then, some federations would tell me how many members they have. Most wouldn't tell you because the number was lower than what people thought it was. And so, and Ricky Crane helped me kind of validate it. If I go back far enough, that's about what it was. So then you can look and see, all right, multiply between IPA and APF, which were the two biggest at the time, had about 12 to 1,500 each, so that percentage of the thing. And that it hasn't died, but it hasn't grown.
No.
So it's still, say, that same number, but now you got a base of 200,000. So now it makes up a very much smaller percentage, but it's the same number of people. But to get back to my point, how in the fuck can you have the minority, even if it's 20% back then, fracture off into 5 different fucking federations?
Yeah.
Right.
And then it was, you'll remember back then, but multiply hated raw, and the raw and the single ply, there's all this animosity because you competed in a certain style with certain wear or whatever it was. Then if you get stuck, even as a gym, well, you're the multiply gym. Well, fuck, you got 5 lifters that are multiply and 600 members. Like, how the fuck does that happen? Right? So these things get out of control really fast.
Yeah.
So then you're trying to pivot back because, yeah, you would love to be that, but there's not enough people to make that business viable. So you can't be that. And it's not what it is in the first place. But I think over time that we've seen that, the raw still may not like the multiply or vice versa and so forth. But I don't think it's anywhere near as decisive as it was. They just see it as different things, which Ed's been saying since the fucking first day I ever met him. It's like the multiply is just different than the single ply.
Yeah. I mean, I've asked him before what his thoughts are. He goes, it's different.
It's just different.
It's just different.
And I think that's kind of what people see now is because we all know this. You put them all in a gym to train together no matter what camp they represent. And they're all lifters and they all fucking love lifting big weights and they all get along. So what you see online is not real.
Well, it's kind of like we were talking about, it's kind of like the world.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Everybody on TV, it's this person hates this person and whatever, but it's really not.
It's not real.
It's not real at all.
It's not real.
It's kind of ridiculous.
It's just leveraging, and trying to project, whatever they think they need to project for whatever objective they think that they have, which usually isn't grounded in anything either, for views, clicks, or whatever it's going to be, for that whole thing. But that's a whole different conversation because does that actually relate to revenue? It's a business. It becomes very cloudy real fast. And most of the time it doesn't.
Yeah.
At what point did you realize that you're, what you want to call famous?
I don't think I am.
I mean, you probably get asked for more pictures than Matt and I would. And how many people want to come here to train?
That's a pretty fucking low bar.
Yeah.
Well, and it's it's funny, we talk about Ed, and coming out for the Arnold, I would fly through Chicago and I'd meet up with Ed basically at the airport and we'd fly Chicago to Columbus together. I mean, as soon as we would get down to the baggage claim, it's just it's Ed's world. You know what I mean? Because everybody's flying in and it's just Ed, can I get a picture with you? Hey man, it's great to meet you. Now I know that you experienced some of the same thing. You're not going to tell me you don't. I won't believe it because I've seen you at the Arnold before, and I know you don't always go to the Arnold, but I've seen you there before. So at what point did you realize if
I would answer directly and honestly, years ago, long time ago. So I went on a cruise of the Caribbean and then somebody recognized me on one of these fucking islands. And my family and relatives will joke with me about it, but it's not all the fun, it's not all the time. Last year we went to the UK and somebody, came up that recognize me. But normally when you see something like that, they're from the States and whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I'm not being swamped, and shit like that. Nobody at the fucking Kroger's down the street knows who the fuck I am.
Wasn't it funny because you get in your own hometown,
Yeah.
but you get outside. It's like a guy that comes to our gym. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's a multi-time world champion. And he'll always say, Brett, you're never going to be a black belt in your own town.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's also where you go. I mean, if I'm going someplace that's going to be populated with strength coaches and lifters, of course somebody's going to know who I am because I've been doing this shit for 27 years.
Sure.
And the more that you're educating people and the more you're up there trying to help people, for instance, Ed right now is recognized not for his lifting. He's recognized because he's been helping people in all these. He travels all over the fucking place.
He's the most humble, giving guy out there.
On his own dime. And is willing to help anybody, anytime, unsolicited, solicited. It doesn't really matter. That's what I know Ed for, right?
Me
and
too.
I saw him fucking compete, so that kind of plays into it as well. But if I go to any regular that doesn't have that demographic, nobody knows who the fuck I am. And that's good because I couldn't imagine being somebody that, is Joe Rogan or something like that.
Now, how about when you were first kind of started seeing your brand like out in more places? Like I know one time my wife and I were like at Costco in Omaha and somebody had an Omaha Barbell sweatshirt on. Into the back of my mind, I'm like, who the fuck are they? I've never seen them at the gym before. I don't fucking know that person. Yeah. But then in the back of your mind, you're like, that's super cool because you have that brand, you know what I mean? Or that logo. I mean, so that's got to feel cool. I'm sure it's all over the world.
The brand does. And through the earlier stages, if we go back to the training logs, there were times I was active and there was times I wasn't. So, Wendler's log was one of the more popular ones. So if mine got higher than Jim's, I just quit posting because I was trying to brand a company, not me.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
So that became this weird balance, right? Because there still is a brand that involves more people than me. There's 100 people that may have worked for us over a period of time. All of those have contributed to elevating the brand, as long as all the brand ambassadors and sponsors and all that. So it's not just me, that did that. So I was very careful on how I was kind of delegating that. The recent iteration of the podcast, Dave Tate's Tabletop Podcast, that I'm a host, man, some of the staff characters, I pushed back against that for a long time. Like, fuck it, somebody else do it. I want to, because of that. And then I got to a point to where, I liked it, and so that was a big part of it because work kind of sucks, especially when you have your own business. I mean, if you're being completely honest, most of what I do on a daily basis, I wish the fuck I couldn't do. And I get all the people that say, well, delegate. Well, you need, there's a component that they miss when they say that is you need the fucking revenue to pay the people to delegate it to.
Yeah.
Like, it's easier fucking said than done. Like, where am I going to shit out the extra 50, 70 grand for all these people to be able to do that when you're operating on a net profit margin of, if you're lucky, 3%? Like, where the fuck does that come from? It doesn't work that way. So you end up doing a lot of shit, but if there's enough of the stuff you really, really like, it makes all that shit worth it. There's a lot of times throughout the company where there wasn't things like that, so it's just a fucking terrible grind of just trying to keep the fucking thing alive and afloat moving forward.
That's like we talked about. It's only 10% of its good times.
Yes, but if you can find that 10%, it's worth the other 90% because a lot of people have jobs that they hate every fucking thing they do every single day, but their 10% is because it provides for their family and so forth and stuff like that. So anybody that has a job that they love 10% of what they do or 20%, they're fortunate because most people don't have that. Right? They work to be able to pay the bills and so forth. And they may take pride in the work. Some may not. Right? But if you can you get what I'm saying? Like, if there's a chunk in there that makes that all worth it, then you got to lean into it. And that was the final push for the podcast. Now, I didn't know how much fucking time it was going to actually take.
Oh, yeah.
as entrepreneurs or business owners, you underestimate fucking everything.
Yeah.
Like, if this isn't going to be that big of a deal, then, oh my God, this is a fucking lot. Then you got to kind of figure out how to balance everything around there. So, in short, there was a time I tried to manage that so it wouldn't get out of hand, and so I wouldn't be branded with the company. Then after a while, I kind of realized, it's 2 decades, kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to change it at this point. I may as well lean into it and go from there.
Yeah.
I mean, you said you're talking about the legacy thing. Yours is a little bit different, I think, than like a Louie Simmons, because like even me, I don't really give a fuck about any of the stuff that Westside puts out anymore, because it's not. They're just kind of regurgitating Louie shit, and I've read, you know what I mean? I've read all that shit multiple times, and like I said, I got to talk to him between him and talking with you and whatever. But you have a brand that'll be around forever. You know what I mean? Like my squat racks at Omaha Barbell are probably going to be there till the day we fucking. So even if you die,
well, the name may be,
but
the company may not.
Yeah, but to me that is, you know what I mean? Like in your legacy, to me, Omaha Barbell wouldn't probably exist or had even been conceptualized if it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just, I'm not trying to like blow you over here, but like it wouldn't be around if it wasn't for, I got into Westside first, somebody had pointed me in the direction of that. And then I discovered you guys. I mean, you've been out before. I modeled the gym very similar to this place, because I got to come out here when you did your first learn to train at the old location we drove by earlier. And I wanted people who couldn't ever maybe come out here to be able to experience that same thing, but in Omaha. Yeah. So your legacy, whatever, if you don't like the word, but it's a legacy that has built the gym that I have, that my wife and I have, and to give people an ability, because it is very similar. Now, atmospheres are always different. You know what I mean? Like Westside was more of the atmosphere than just a place. But so I don't want you to think that you have a legacy, whether you like it or not.
Well, that legacy is people helping other people, like I talked about, and that was set out from the start, which is the catalyst to be able to drive all that. Because at some point in time, the name, the website, and all that probably won't exist. It's just how it's going to happen. I mean, if we were $100 million company, maybe, but at some point in time that, I die, croak, or whatever it's going to be, like, what's the succession plan? There's really no succession plan that's in place. I would like to think that there's one, but what the fuck is it? I get acquired for, nothing, because it's really not worth anything. So I mean, there's the reality of all that. But if that all goes away, but then that inspiration was enough for people like yourself to open gyms to be able to help other people and all that, then the aim was achieved. And that's fine. So that I've always been able to wrap my head around, where, my backup plan is to have enough of you guys that have gyms that, if everything goes fucking south, I can go work as a trainer at one of them and at least be able to pay my fucking bills. I used to joke with JL about this all the time. Like, you can't go out of business, man, because if it all goes south, I'm going to go to you, to go back to being a trainer again, which I can do now because my kids are older.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of, I guess, that's and I think anybody might thank you to you, like, for what you've
big time
provided out there for everyone. And like I said, even like the business in general, like the way you've helped us with the business, whether it's buying equipment and taking care of us. And, Matt, obviously Goodwin's always been a great help to me. But yeah, I think it's the legacy of that name, that logo will be seen for years and years to come. I mean that logo will probably never come off of my rack, obviously, because you know what I mean?
I hope not.
And so, I mean, I appreciate you letting us come out here, hang out, and train for the day, and to do the podcast with you. Like I said, you've always...
It's an interesting thing you just said, because I'm sitting here thinking about whatever they call that, Grudepi Tempe or whatever, the shit that they found that's like 20,000 years ago. Yeah. Like, we'll all be fucking dust, and somebody's going to dig through fucking a mile of dirt, and they're going to find a power rack that's still going to have that logo
What was this cult logo for?
Yeah, because it's laser cut. So that would be cool.
Yeah,
that'd be totally fine.
Yeah, we found this picture. There's a bunch of fat guy huddled around this thing. I don't really know.
Yeah.
What was this used for? Sacrifice?
But Yeah, I mean, we appreciate it. I don't know if you got anything else, Matt.
No, I guess the only thing I wanted to kind of ask is like, what's the future for Elite FTS? Like, you got things coming down the pipe, some big things you're working on.
There's different iterations when you're in business, as I'm sure he's going to tell you. There's growth modes and survival modes, right? Right. So when you're in survival mode, it's just let's get to the next fucking quarter, let's get to the next year. And so we've been in survival mode for a couple of years, right? So the growth mode, as far as what's down the pipe, we're always looking at, new equipment pieces, all the accessories and shit like that we have on the site. So it's really kind of, there's not really a lot of new innovation that goes on where I'd love to sit there and say, look, we have this innovative piece of equipment that's going to change everything. But that's bullshit. And we know it's bullshit because what have you seen in the past decade that's really been anything innovative and new?
Well, there's a good run of bars there for a while.
Yeah. Well, the specialty bar run, And maybe there'll be other ones. I mean, I play around with different ones all the time, but it's just like anything. Most of them suck. So you got to keep digging through.
I remember I'd get on the site like weekly and be like, oh, a new bar.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah. So it's just that, it's more from the media side, we're pushing harder there because that increases that reach, which in turn should increase, more customers to come from. The more customers that come from, the more we can increase that reach to be able to build that. There's a lot of things I'd like to do that don't have the capital to be able to do that, kind of go along with that education side. But as education's changed over the time, Q&As and training logs and articles are relatively inexpensive to produce. Right? There's not a lot going into that. But as it's gone more video, media and stuff like that, the cost becomes bigger, for that, which kind of, it doesn't stifle. It just means that the quality of the content has to be better than the quantity of the content. At one point in time, we were publishing 64 articles a month, and that's great if people read them, but over a period of time, that's not so much the case to where it's now a longer form podcast, which is actually better and more enjoyable than fucking writing articles all the time, and you can't spell for shit and grammar and so forth. So
ChatGPT, baby.
Oh yeah, don't get me going on that one because it's a rabbit hole that I live in more than people fucking know.
Same, man.
Crazy,
it's terrible.
Crazy. Yeah, so that's how I'll go with there. So we always have new products coming on. We're always trying to innovate products that we have to be better because the customer feedback from people like yourself is that you don't realize certain things, even on things that have been around forever. Somebody will say something like, God damn, why didn't nobody ever think of that before? Like, that's pretty easy to fix.
Yeah.
Let's change that.
Man, funny story on that. I won't throw the company out there because I don't know if they're still in business. I had like 3 pieces from this company, and they happened to, one of the reps was in Omaha or something, and they stopped by, and they're like, oh, hey, we're with so-and-so. We know you got a couple pieces of our equipment. I was like, oh, yeah. And they're like, yeah, like, man, they're just great. What do you think about them? I was like, well, they're kind of a piece of shit. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I go, well, the pads on that thing are fucking trash. The cables break on this thing, and this thing over here fucking is bent. Oh, that really just like crushed their soul.
They're like, oh, shit, I got to go.
Look at the
My wife's on the phone. Exit.
Yeah, I was just like, they were like, that was not what we thought was going to happen. But they weren't like, oh, hey, we'll send you a new pad for this. Or it was just like, oh,
that's neat.
Cool. All right, well, see you later, I guess.
Yeah, crazy.
But I think that's all we got, though.
Yeah.
I want to hear your show notes to close because your opening was on point.
Like, that's a really pretty practice.
Yeah. I know how that shit. I know it's harder than what people think.
Oh yeah,
sometimes I get going too fast on it, and my wife will be like, "You need to slow down a little bit. You can't even fucking breathe when you're doing that."
I can't remember it half the time.
Oh man,
like, I'm jealous of the people that just have like Joe Rogan's just got like a blank screen with because he's reading the shit. Like, man, I would love to be able to just read it. And not have to like look at the camera to be able to do it. It takes like a million takes.
Yeah, I just wing it every time, and then usually because we all have different nicknames, so I got to rattle through those.
But they change, and like sometimes we'll be talking about something beforehand, totally unrelated, that we're all just kind of laughing about, and he'll start, and then someone makes a comment on it, and he doesn't even get like 10 seconds into the intro, and then we're talking dick jokes again, and we're like, oh shit, hold on.
Yeah.
But Well, we appreciate you doing it. We appreciate you guys listening out there. Like, subscribe, share, follow, even if you don't like us. And remember, the goal is to be a little less shitty every day. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.